Hello. I think, yes, we have already people joining online. This is really good. We are on time. In Germany, it's 3 p.m. So thank you everyone that is also joining from Asia, from Singapore, and it's quite late. So we are aware of that. We're in Frankfurt here in Germany. And I would say we can start this first hybrid version of our expert talk. So good, well, good afternoon, everyone. Also for the people here attending today. And a really warm welcome to our panel discussion. Today, Singapore Unlocking Regional Growth Opportunities, live from here from Frankfurt, from the Innovation Hub. I will say a few words later to this. So my name is Annemarie and I'm representing AsiaBridge, Asienbrücke e.V. We are a German non-profit business network dedicated to fostering cooperation between Europe and Asia, and especially between Germany and the dynamic ecosystem of Southeast Asia. And I would really like to thank all of our attendees today. So as said, we have an expert talk, an online session via Zoom where participants are joining. And usually we do these expert talks on different and relevant topics all over Asia. This time it's all on the focus of Singapore. And we thought, why don't do this format into a hybrid one where we could maybe gather a bit in Frankfurt as well together. So this is our first hybrid session. Thank you everyone for making it here to the Innovation Hub. And as said, please feel free to participate. We would love to get some feedback or get some questions for our experts through our chat box. So please feel free to write your questions here. I will see them and I can take them up and ask our experts. And also here, the attendees we have in our little roundtable, please also come in and chime in and get your questions in. We will be happy to have like a shared round table discussion. And yeah, before we begin, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the Innovation Hub. So we are sitting here in Frankfurt at the Innovation Hub Rhein-Main. They are hosting us in a really wonderful space. You can't really see it as much as I do, but it's a really wonderful space. And we truly appreciate your support. I will be happy to take over, that you take over, Stefan, afterwards to say a few words about what the Innovation Hub, what's the mission about this and how this is also like a gateway opener for Asia into Frankfurt and into Germany and into Europe as well. So it's a big opportunity, a rival opportunity for Asian companies here in Frankfurt. Well, and now to get into the discussion fully, this year, 2025, marks the 16th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Singapore and Germany. And that's 6 decades of friendship, of trust, and of close cooperation, not only politically, but also economically, technologically, culturally. And Singapore has long been one of Asia's most vibrant innovation and business hubs, and while Germany remains Europe's industrial powerhouse. And both countries share a strong belief in the open market, innovation, partnerships as key driver for growth and stability. But the world is changing around us and it's changing fast. So while much of the global spotlight is often on other giants, let's say China, let's say India, ASEAN has quietly become one of the most dynamic regions in the world. So ASEAN is home to nearly 680 million people and now counts 11 countries on this region with the new incorporation of Timor-Leste. We know there's the ASEAN Gipfel as well taking place. But Singapore continue to play a really priority role to connect East and the West, a hub for technology, a bridge for sustainable and resilient growth. So transitioning to this and opening a door directly to Singapore, I would like to start, and we are delighted to have via online and in Singapore, Jens Rübbert from LBBW Bank and chairman of the European Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. He's joining us directly from there. Jens, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I would say the floor is yours, but here it is, the screen is yours. And well, it would be great to start with you by telling us about the significance of German-Singaporean relations in the context of global development. And for the people here, I will display Jens in a second so we can see him as well. Jens.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
No.
Annemarie, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now? I hear you in a second. But please start. Our online participants can hear you.
Okay. Can you
hear
me?
Yes, there we go.
Great. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much. It's an honor. Good afternoon. Here it's a bit later. We have now 7 hours time difference, so it's 10 p.m. I would love to be in Frankfurt in person with you, but I decided it's a bit warmer here than I stay in Singapore. But jokes aside, I will in fact come to Germany soon, but couldn't make it for this one. That's why we do this online. So again, thank you very much. Perhaps you already mentioned a few things, and I would like to elaborate a bit on what's going on right now as we speak, because I think that's very important, to understand the context of the whole region, because there is some implications, of course, also for European companies and businesses, of what has been just discussed and what will be discussed tomorrow. I think everybody is waiting for that big summit. So let me perhaps start with the ASEAN summit, which just took place in Kuala Lumpur. So ASEAN, as you know, are the 10 or now 11 Southeast Asian countries. From the 26th to the 28th of October, this summit has been taking place in Kuala Lumpur. It had several key outcomes, as you rightly pointed out. Number one, for a long time, the ASEAN has taken on another member country. You mentioned it, Timor-Leste is now the 11th official member state of the ASEAN community. Furthermore, the head of states have agreed on a so-called Kuala Lumpur Peace Accord. You might know that Malaysia has played quite a role in negotiating the peace between Thailand and Cambodia. It was not only Mr. Trump, of course, he was involved as well, but it started before. So Malaysia is getting more importance on that front, because they are also currently and they have the chairmanship of ASEAN at the moment this year. Then they have basically adopted the Kuala Lumpur Declaration on Inclusive Green Growth, which I think the name speaks for itself. They came up with a joint commitment to enhance regional housing resilience and smart city connectivity, and they also renewed pledges to accelerate the ASEAN circular economy framework. So as you can see, a lot of topics around the area, green transformation and social housing, social standards. What was really interesting this year, there were a lot of ASEAN summits that several world leaders also attended, obviously including President Trump, the president of the UN Secretary General, and several heads of BRICS states, G20, president of the European Council, Costa was also part, and the United Nations were also. So it was quite a big summit, and I think only emphasizes what you just said, that ASEAN as a region is becoming more and more important, and is the best proof that all these leaders attended. From tomorrow onwards, there's the so-called APEC summit starting in South Korea. APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, is, consists of 21 countries from Asia and the Americas, obviously, bordering the Pacific. And we already heard that today at lunch on the sidelines of the summit, President Trump said that he expects a trade deal between China and the US, which would be good for both countries. And as he said, something very exciting for everyone with a great result. So he will meet indeed President Xi Jinping tomorrow. And I think if they conclude or come to something like an agreement, needless to say, it would be not only good for this region, but it would be good for the entire world, I think, because that's obviously one of the big elephants, the rivalry between the US and China. Of course, it will be not eliminated, and there will be certainly, further other issues, but I think it's a good way to reach any kind of agreement at this point in time. Perhaps a few words on China. Obviously, the superpower in terms of economic power in Asia. When we looked at the beginning of 2025, China's growth outlook was a bit clouded by, I think, renewed concerns about housing market, deflationary pressures, and obviously a very, I would say, uncertain external environment. And amid the US tariff escalation in April, Chinese manufacturing and trade were expected to suffer, to a significant degree. However, and thanks to a very proactive fiscal policy, and a very accommodative monetary policy environment, and I think most importantly, the ability of the exporting industry to find new clients outside of the US market, China's growth has more or less remained very resilient. Recently, the IMF upgraded its 2025 growth forecast for China from 4% to 4.8%, and that is quite a significant change. And the economy, I'd say, is also expected to grow faster than originally anticipated next year. So overall, I think that's pretty much good news. Of course, risks remain, particularly as we know with regard to the persistently weak consumer confidence that needs to be fixed. On the other hand, the savings quote in China is very high, with about 30%, so much higher than even in Germany. So the money is there, but the consumers, in my view, need to win back trust in order to spend their money. And of course, again, geopolitical tensions remain a risk for China as well. Perhaps a word with regard to Germany's relationship with China, and this is a personal opinion, which is at the moment, unfortunately, not really existing. As you all heard, our foreign minister decided not to go to China. Instead, he was in Japan, Indonesia, and India. My personal view, big mistake. China is Germany's largest trading partner, and he should have visited China first, but perhaps this is something what you can discuss later, as I said, my personal opinion. I'd like, before I come to Singapore, perhaps, allow me to perhaps focus in terms of Southeast Asia on two countries, because in two countries also, there were significant things happening, and that's in Vietnam and Indonesia. Why I say that? Vietnam has also this year gone through I would say, the second largest administrative reform since the Doi Moi. The Doi Moi is the opening of the economy in 1986. So almost 40 years later, you know, the new Secretary General of the party secretary, Tolam, has really proven that you know, there is room for further reforms. And just to give you a few numbers, he has not only cut down the number of ministries from 19 to 14, but he has also done a geographical reform in terms of, you know, cutting down the 63 provinces in the country to 34. So that's, you know, almost half, a bit more than half of it. And he has cut out an entire layer of the administration. Below the provinces, we had 696 districts. That layer is not existing anymore. So he's cut out a whole administration layer. And then below the districts, there were about 10,000 communes, and that had been cut down to 3,300. So that is really a significant step to reform the country. There's estimates that 100,000 to 200,000 civil servants are affected. So it's really quite significant. And then on top, you have seen Vietnam is growing at around 8% this year, and the government has very ambitious plans, you know, to grow by 10% until 2030. So Vietnam is certainly, yeah, I mean, in the spotlight at the moment. Second country, neighboring country of Singapore, Indonesia. You know, also here, Indonesia, I would say, in terms of the relationship with the European Union, the September will also go down in history, in particular the EU-ASEAN trade relationship. After almost a decade, and I think 19 rounds of negotiations, the much longed for comprehensive, so-called comprehensive economic partnership agreement, CEPA, between the EU and Indonesia, which is the largest economy in Southeast Asia, and by the way, a G20 member, is finally over the line and has been concluded. I mean, this is a major, major step and a breakthrough also in the relationship between the EU and Southeast Asia, or ASEAN. This means, and I say that again, this means 98.5% of Indonesian tariffs on EU goods will be removed. 98.5%. So the opening, you know, of the Indonesian service markets in key sectors, such as computer and telecommunication services, will happen. A more attractive regulatory environment for EU investors in priority sectors, in EVs, renewables, and electronics. There will be much easier customs procedures and supply chains in raw materials. You know, Indonesia is the largest producer of nickel. So, I mean, that all is very, these are very good signals. So if you want, next to Vietnam and Singapore, of course, now we have the third country in the Southeast Asian region, in ASEAN, having an agreement, a trade agreement with the EU. And I had the pleasure to meet our new EU Trade Commissioner, Šefčovič, in May in Singapore, where he signed the digital trade agreement with Singapore, between the EU and Singapore. He basically has the ambition to also conclude free trade agreements with the next three big economies, which is Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines, by end of next year. That's very ambitious. And it's only possible, and I think the EU is willing to do this, to basically lower the standards in terms of, you know, the very high standards which they started negotiations before, and also the willingness to make compromises. That is clearly seen. When I was in Brussels earlier this year, I've never heard the word deregulation so many times at so many different levels than before. I think that's a very good signal. and it's needed. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, coming to Singapore, I think Singapore plays a really critical role in these days, as I'd say, and starting perhaps also from a geopolitical point of view, as a neutral and a very strategic hub for European and of course German companies. I think we see a highly complex and more fragmented geopolitical landscape, and therefore, we should really appreciate Singapore's role with emphasis on neutrality, strategic value, and really, providing a world-class infrastructure, I think, for businesses. So my first point on Singapore, therefore, is the neutral diplomatic stance and the credibility the country has. I think Singapore maintains strong ties with all the major powers, the US, EU, with China, India, Japan, and is through its neutrality a very safe base of operations. In particular, if the US-China competition intensifies. Needless to say, we have a very stable, rules-based and predictable environment, which is not necessarily the case in all the neighboring countries. So implications for German businesses and firms. Singapore acts as a buffer. We already have 2,300 German companies in Singapore. And many of these companies have their regional headquarters either for Southeast Asia or for the entire region in Singapore. Singapore is a strategic supply chain and trade hub, the second largest harbor in the world, with connections with the key node, I would say, in the China Plus One supply chain strategy. Not necessarily as a low-cost production base, but as a logistics, management, and technology center. I think that's very important to know. And then, as I said, transshipment hub, helping European firms navigate around bottlenecks or barriers in other regional markets. So clearly a command and control center for many companies. Point number 3 I would make is a financial, legal, and a compliance hub. Singapore has a world-class financial and legal ecosystem. I mean, it's one of the global financial powerhouses and centers. As I said, it has become the home for many regional headquarters. And in terms of trade finance, ESG compliance, and digital finance, I think Singapore is also leading. Plus, as I said, secure and a legally robust base, IP protection, financial planning, this is on the plus side as well. Singapore is also a leader in sustainability and green transition. Singapore has a green plan and a very, very detailed strategy how to become carbon neutral. There's a good ESG regulatory framework in place, and Singapore simply offers the infrastructure. So it is also, if you want, a platform for green innovation. Fifth point, digital and innovation gateway. I just mentioned the EU. I think, Singapore is the first digital trade agreement the EU has concluded. I think Singapore has a few more, but this tells you that Singapore is in that respective also, well ahead of many other states, and together, as I said, with an open and rules-based and technology advanced country, certainly at the forefront, and a launchpad, I would say, for digital innovation-led services. And perhaps last point, which goes a bit back to my first point, I would call Singapore a geopolitical risk management center, yeah, because I think it provides a platform for, let's say, scenario planning, intelligence, and policy engagement, and with its neutrality, the perfect place to do so. Singapore offers strategic foresight and resilience capabilities, and we have seen that also, throughout the COVID crisis. So I don't know. That was maybe a little bit more than 10 minutes. I could go on and on and on, but I don't want to bore you. I think you should have a fruitful discussion. But of course, if there's questions, I don't know if we can do a little Q&A or not. Happy to stay on for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens, and thank you for the really honest and insightful information. I don't know if we have questions here. If not, I can also share with you the questions we will have later in the discussion so that you know as well what we have been discussing about here in this round. And it was really interesting to see how your reflections on ASEAN as a whole and how Singapore is still the bridge between Asia and Europe for so many strategic fields, and how this is remaining to be. I would say you set the scene, and we should build on and continue the conversation here with our partners in the little panel we have today. So thank you so much, Jens, and looking forward to see you in Frankfurt next time.
Okay, thank you very much.
So continuing our conversation here, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have 3 really good experts here on my side. And starting with the ladies, Ms. Selina Sia, she's a Regional Director Europe at the Singapore Economic Development Board, known as EDB, also here in Frankfurt. So please reach out to her. She is in town, and she will share, and she can share Singapore's perspective as a global business and innovation hub from the first hand. We have Klaus Böhme here on my side, Executive Vice President, Interface Technologies Division at Wago GmbH, representing the German Mittelstand. Wago recently opened also an R&D center in Singapore and brings hands-on experience on that. And we have Dr. Pablo Lizana at the end, founder of Lizana and Company Asia Pacific, strategic consultancy based in Singapore, and member, of course, of Asienbrücke. So I'm really glad you're here today. And you can help us look at Singapore's role in the broader geopolitical and economic landscape, a bit as Jens just did before. And so thank you all for being here. I would really suggest that we have an open discussion as well. So if anyone wants to chime in or have any questions or connect, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, say what is your linking point to Singapore, and let's see if we can integrate everyone also in the discussion somehow. And so to start with you, Pablo, I would say, connecting to the words also Jens had at the beginning, let's zoom out a bit and take a broader view. The first question would be for you. How do you see the current development in Asia, and where does Singapore stand on the regional map today? Because before we had this clear vision, but as said, a lot of things are changing right now. We have China, we have the USA. So what is happening in the global panorama?
Thank you, Anne. Well, it's a pleasure for me to be part of this panel and actually talking about Singapore and the role of Singapore in general, but mainly from the perspective as well, what is the role Singapore has in Asia Pacific as a whole, and in Southeast Asia. But more important as well, to see what is the implication these have and the role of Singapore for German Mittelstand companies. Jens mentioned a few times during his keynote how dynamic the region is. And if you want to understand the picture, I mean, with a little bit more focus on the economic part, the commercial part, so the meaning, what does it mean to German Mittelstand companies? And that's a little bit the topic we're going to deep dive today with my, my fellow panelists. We have to see a bit the entire role in APEC, and I would like to give in a few sentences our view on Asia, our view on APEC. And yes, we need to talk about the three relevant regions, and this is really very black and white. So we are talking about China, we are talking about India, we're talking about Southeast Asia, and within Southeast Asia, the role of Singapore. If we start talking about China, and there is no doubt Jens just mentioned the importance of China for the region and for the world. We need to clearly well accept and to recognize China is simply the market in Asia. And every German company, every Mittelstand company has to have a look at what to do in China, and they have to have an answer to their China strategy. And the reason why I'm saying that is manifold. First of all, China, as I mentioned, is the biggest market, and it's going to remain the biggest market in the region for years to come. The potential is enormous. Secondly, we know and we saw the development China had over the years, developing from a, let's say, a more labor-intensive manufacturing country, so labor-intensive manufacturing, to an extremely capital-intensive manufacturing. So we are talking today about highest technology, which is applied in China. So China is a superpower in terms of manufacturing, and they've very clearly mentioned and said, and you're all familiar with the documents or the policy made in China 2025, where China already 10 years ago said, we would like to be in certain industry leading in the world. And they defined very well and very precise the industries they want to be leaders, technological leader and dominating, so to say, the markets. And today we are seeing the responses. The response is China is a superpower in manufacturing. And another very remarkable element I would like to mention is we saw as well the pace, how China, being a very much cost-oriented country, so developing products with very low cost and corresponding quality, low quality, to become a country with companies developing products which have already world-class level, high quality, maybe not the quality we are used from Germany, but high quality, developed in a timing which is impressive, and a fraction of cost. And this has been already announced during the documentation, the documents made in China 2025. And 10 years back, so 10 years back, we knew that, and today that's a fact. And that's another very impressive point. Now, for German companies, the question is, how can I position myself in China? And I don't want to deep dive on this point, but I would like to say only one sentence. The answer has to be, today, you have to be extremely local. So it's not enough to have a sales department in China. You have to have the entire value chain in China in order to be able to react according to the market requirements, So the phases or the time where we can develop in Germany, we can produce in Germany, or we can produce elsewhere and then export from there, so to say, to China, this is over. And that the reason for that is because the local competition is extremely hard and has been developed over years. And this local competition within these parts, so to say, there are companies already in the global markets in Southeast Asia, and we are seeing them in Europe. So that's China. So China needs to have a very clear answer from us, from every Mittelstand company, what is my China strategy? Now, let's move to India. What is happening in India? That's a completely different environment we are seeing there. If I may characterize India today in indeed 2 or 3 sentences only. The first is, India is a huge market potential. We just heard about India and the role of India and what is the growth rates we are expecting. I mean, different institutes are mentioning between 6 and 8%. Well, between 6 and 8% growth in GDP year by year is a lot. And these over the next year. So we expect India to become the second largest economy, surpassing the European Union and surpassing Japan and other countries by 2030. So India is a potential. It's an extreme high potential. So that's already one reason for German companies to consider very seriously India. The second extremely important topic, and that has been mentioned as well by Jens a little bit, is the topic China plus one. China plus one has, well, we can look at these expressions, from different perspectives, but let me simplify and talk about, apart from being a little bit more independent from China, I talked about, you have to be fully represented in China with all the functions of the value chain. That includes, for example, manufacturing, that includes as well R&D. But the China plus one concept is to be independent of that, because we don't know what might happen with China. You know the tensions we have, you know the geopolitical risk we have in the region. So it is well advised, to be a bit more independent. That means to set up, and China plus one means to set up additional value chain functions in certain countries, in this case in India. And India is preparing and knows about, of course, about these. India is preparing to be attractive to foreign investors in order for them to set up manufacturing plants or to expand the manufacturing plants, not only to serve their own country, so India, but to serve the region or even globally. So the goal is to be part of global value, of global supply chains. And this applies as well to R&D. And this is an answer as well, and that's a need. I mean, for foreign companies, I'm talking about German companies, Mittelstand companies, it is something to consider, because from our perspective, from my perspective, the driving factor is the market requirement. Are we able, in order, to fulfill the market requirements, having a different setup, a different business model, or do we have to be closer to the markets? And the answer today is definitely we need to be closer to the markets. And now, if we have China and India, the third region is Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia is in between. And yes, Southeast Asia is extremely attractive. It is attractive. Jens mentioned as well a few countries as well, Vietnam, Indonesia. Yes, indeed. But Southeast Asia has a huge challenge, which is it is extremely fragmented. And this fragmentation is an additional challenge to every German company in order to answer the question, what should be our setup in this fragmented region? And the fragmentation, many parameters to describe this fragmentation, but let's use only a few in relation to the German interest, which is, and let me, very simply speaking, the German interest is technology. That's what we are providing. That's where we are strong in. So products with newest technology, state of the art, so the engineering capabilities we have in the country. So, and if we took these parameters, so to say, the readiness of the markets to absorb technology Germany is offering, we have different type of countries or clusters in Southeast Asia. And if we look, let me simplify again a little bit. If we look at only 6 countries who are making up more than 90% of the GDP of the region, and these are the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. These 6 countries, if we subdivide them, so to say, into 3 clusters, looking at Indonesia and Philippines as one, there we see right now the less readiness to absorb German technology. This doesn't mean there is no readiness, there is no, so to say, absorption potential, there is, but it's the less compared to the other clusters I'm going to mention in a few more seconds. And as Jens mentioned, I fully agree as well, Indonesia is a potential market, is a huge market which is coming. So we need to start preparing for this. The second cluster, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand. Vietnam having with the General Secretary, the new General Secretary, To Lam, doing a lot of changes and a lot of adjustments in the country, is creating a platform going to enhance the attractiveness of the country for foreign investors. Vietnam is right now characterized by extremely strong export, but I mean, and so to say, very roughly speaking, lower value add. And this is something what Tolam is changing. He wants to have more value add in the country in order to become more attractive and in order to develop the country more. So not in the same stage, more advanced in terms of readiness are Malaysia and Thailand. We know about the different industries we have in Malaysia. For example, in Malaysia, we have semiconductor back-end activities and so on and so forth. These are the second cluster, these three countries. And all these countries have one common element, so to say, is they are all export-oriented. Whereas to go back, Indonesia is very much a local market where they are looking at. And now Singapore. Singapore is by far different. It is, you know, per capita, extremely different to all the other countries. It is regarding the innovation index far away from all the other countries in Southeast Asia, and is by far the most developed country in terms of readiness for German products. And that's the reason why German companies, big companies, multinationals, are setting up advanced manufacturing plants in Singapore. And as a China plus 1, 4, you know, 4 advanced manufacturing needs. And within all these, I mean, these, what I just mentioned, within this complexity of the region is where Singapore is. And that's what we want to deep dive today with Selina and with Klaus. And I'm glad and happy to see how the discussion goes. And I'm very curious to see what our answers are going to be. Anne, over to you.
I would say, Pablo, you just gave us a quick masterclass into the ASEAN region. So really happy to listen to all of your really wise words. And thank you for dividing also ASEAN again into clusters. This was really interesting to hear. And actually, it makes a lot of sense. So Selina, may I give over to you and ask you directly into this, like really diverse region. There is Singapore. What is the EDB doing? Why is EDB important? What is your role? And why or what's the specific focus of EDB here in Germany and why you are in Frankfurt so we can understand better what EDB is doing?
Okay, thank you so much, Anna. And I just want to say a quick few words that it's a real pleasure to be on this panel. We've heard from Jens, we heard from Pablo, fantastic master classes, also outlining a few of the strengths that Singapore has and really what is the characteristics of not only the Southeast Asian region, but also the larger Asian region. So a quick introduction to myself. My name is Selina Sia-Pfeuffer. I am from the Singapore Economic Development Board. This is an agency under the Ministry of Trade and Industry in Singapore, and we lead industry development in Singapore. Specifically, we look at two things, manufacturing as well as exportable services. And together with the industry, with the companies there, this comprises about 40% of Singapore's entire economy. So the reason why I am then based in Frankfurt, or why I'm based in Germany, is that Germany is a very strategic partner to Singapore. I think Jens mentioned there are over 2,300 different German companies who have incorporated, set up their RHQ, R&D, manufacturing in Singapore. And this is from all sizes. So you have the very big companies, large multinationals. Siemens, for example, announced that they are setting up their semantic manufacturing plant in Singapore. You have the likes of DHL in Singapore as well, BASF, huge companies, but you also have the mid-cap companies and Mittelstand. So your likes of Wago, IFM, ZIG, Rübbert & Schwarz as well. And also even smaller companies such as Ullmann, Zwickroll, etc. And these companies have been with us decades long. So for example, Zwickroll celebrated their 25th anniversary in Singapore, I think a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. And similar for Rübbert & Schwarz, Wago, very, very long history. So I'm actually here because we are continuing this relationship. We know that Germany is a very important partner for us, and we know that there's also interest to understand what's happening in Asia, where are these growth opportunities from, and how can you best tap on them to grow your business globally. I think this is a very interesting time for us. To be very honest, I'm in Frankfurt because it offers the most connectivity. For our role, we also fly to different countries within Europe. But I would say that Frankfurt is my weekend home. I spend most of the time where the industry is, so in the south of Germany, for example, and also in the north part. Frankfurt is some more commercial banking, connectivity, super place. So this is a little bit about my role. I'm here to have these personal conversations with you. And that's why, as Anna mentioned at the start, if there are any questions, and we're here to get your questions answered, and that's the whole point of this panel. So please feel free to ask.
Yes, and also to the participants online, because we know you can hear us. So please ask your questions. Selina, maybe before we go over to you, one last question to Singapore. What would you say, super briefly, what makes Singapore unique as an investment location for the German Mittelstand, so German SMEs, companies, right now? And why will that be like that in the future?
So I think, and this shouldn't be underemphasized, when you look globally, it's important to see where the growth is coming from. I think a lot of them, Jens and Pablo already talked about Southeast Asia, but just to paint this in a larger context, this region is expected to be the third largest economic region by 2030. And it is also expected to grow by 5.1%. So the top five Southeast Asian countries are expected to grow on an average of 5.1% in the next 10 years. So this is it's really a growing region. And I think what's then important is to find, as Pablo mentioned, the right place to think about the region strategically. And for Singapore, I think one of the advantages that we have is not just about being a gateway. So a lot of people have mentioned the values that Singapore offers, the strong rule of law, the English speaking, the right, in German words, Rahmenbedingungen, that help businesses actually flourish and internationalize quickly. But I think it's also where you think about really making a strategic choice of how do you do your long-term planning from here. So it's not just a gateway, but we help companies also think about, okay, what are the next wave of innovations that are coming up? How do you build R&D setups to capitalize on this? How do you partner international partners beyond Europe, right? And access these companies who are also from the region, who are based here and have their innovations hubs here. I would say that nobody has the monopoly of good ideas right now. And innovation cycles are happening so fast that it's hard for one company to keep up. So having this, I would say, cross-cultural, as well as a very concentrated place where the very different elements or the industries are together is an advantage for us. So I would say that, as people like to say, being small is a constraint, but being compact, it's an advantage. And Pablo would gladly share with you of how the ecosystem is run. Strong ties between research institutes and the industry, between startups as well. And a very industrialized talent base. So 40% of our talent base graduate from science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which make it also a very nice match for the Mittelstand companies that are looking to enter. Yeah. So very briefly.
Okay, that's interesting, and that's also an interesting point for Mittelstand for sure, and that clarifies also the sector, I guess. And coming to you, Klaus, maybe you can, before I ask you a question, say briefly something about your role, about Wago, also for our online viewers, what Wago does, and then I would like to ask you the question. We talked briefly in the introduction about the R&D center you established as Wago in Singapore. Why? Because we heard of so many opportunities in the region. Why Singapore, and why it is such a move for Wago?
Thank you. Yeah, first, thank you for having me today. My name is Klaus Böhme. I'm responsible for the division Interface Technology. And Wago has now 75 years. I heard before a keyword, this was innovation. And the whole story with Wago started with an innovation, a spring connection to connect wires with the help of a spring instead of a screw. So it sounds simple, but was a breakthrough in the industry worldwide in the meantime. So we started in a very early time to set up subsidiaries around the world, sales subsidiaries, and also production sites. So we have 31 subsidiaries now worldwide and 9 production sites. So this was already in early years the case that we said we have to produce not only in Germany, we have also to produce abroad. So and R&D was always the holy grail. Yeah? So we kept R&D in Germany, as most of the medium-sized companies did it, because we wanted to protect actually our innovations, our ideas, not that they fade away and will be copied too early. Then the situation changed with when China came up, and of course in the beginning we faced some copycats. We were copied, but we were somehow relaxed in the beginning because we had always the argument quality. Yeah, made in Germany, good quality. And after a while, we recognized, well, it's not enough anymore. And we need to continue with our innovations, with having innovative ideas and developing products. And so we were still focused with R&D in Germany, but we saw that we have to do more on the research side. But it's also difficult. It became more and more difficult to find the engineers in Germany. And this was then the time when we thought about, well, we cannot keep R&D only in Germany. We have also to go abroad. And where to go, this was then a big question. And of course, Asia was somehow the region where many things were ongoing. In China, India was in the beginning, well, we are for more than 30 years in India, but really that upswing and that dynamic in India is now visible for 2-3 years. And so we took the decision, well, to go to Singapore. Why? Because in Singapore, it's all a bit tight, but at the same time, we can find so many companies with R&D workplace there. And so we said, well, there's a pool of engineers. There are many universities, they generate engineers, and it's all very compact. And we wanted also to emphasize this research part, to undertake generic developments. And this was when we took the decision, well, to open up an R&D competence center in Singapore. We had already a sales subsidiary, so it was not a complete new start. So we had already somehow an infrastructure. And the intention was to cooperate, to undertake generic developments, and to have here the first foothold in Asia with R&D. And this is how the whole story started.
May I ask, I don't know the answer, but was there a connection between EDB and Wago for this step?
Well, actually, we looked for companies which are already placed in Singapore. Through the companies, we got in touch with Pablo. Through Pablo, we got in touch with EDB. So in the end, it was a networking procedure. And then we visited the Economic Development Board. And I must say this was already the first meeting was very promising because, well, when you know somehow the authorities here in Germany sometimes, and when you go then to Singapore to the EDB, this was a different story. Yeah? So we were welcomed. They searched for the points where they can support us. And this was for us then really a benefit because it was easy. It was simply easy to cooperate and to undertake that first step in terms of R&D.
That was a really diplomatic way of saying things. Like you said, the buzzword was innovation. So taking on innovation, how would you say for the Wago strategy, the global innovation strategy changed since having this center in Singapore?
I mean, it's rather easy to put on a PowerPoint slide the word innovation. And it's also rather easy to say, well, our company is innovative and we have innovative products. And so it is actually inflationary use, the word innovation. If you really look to real innovations, if you want to have products which are technically, functionally advanced, which gives really an added value to customers, and it's rather more difficult really to get these ideas and to develop these ideas. And so it has something to do then with, first you have to have an idea, but you have then also the technique for. And in order to generate ideas, you have to be, is in my personal opinion, you have to be together with universities, because they are researching on new methods, on new technology, on new semiconductors, etc., etc. And this is actually giving you an idea what is possible. And with that possibilities, you can generate then an idea how to integrate it in products and how to develop then products. So first is the research. And this combination, therefore you need to have universities which are also very supportive and willing to help you. And this is in Singapore, in all universities we have been and where we now cooperating, was the case. So the professors are very open. They look for the connection to the industry. We can use even laboratories if we have not the equipment in-house. So we can go to the universities, can use together with the students or with the professors the laboratories. And they are simply happy to have this exchange. Also here, this then what is motivating actually to continue and to work on such innovations.
Okay, understood. That makes it really clear, actually. Selina, I would like to ask, now that we touched the innovation part, if you, I mean, and also your story and Wago story, this sounds really logical. It makes sense. But I think one question that bears in mind for a lot of the SMEs and so German Mittelstand companies is that when you talk about Singapore, it seems expensive. And talking about the money topic, what would you tell the German Mittelstand when they ask you, but it is expensive?
Yeah, so I think also being very direct about that Singapore will never be the cheapest location, right? And how I get or how I encourage companies to think about that is that what makes sense for you in the long run strategically. And here are two things to consider. One is the values, and the second one is the value. So the values in terms of who do you want to partner, does this place or this location actually correspond with what you look for in your long-term growth? The openness for collaboration, the long-term thinking, the stability premium that I would say that companies are increasingly willing to pay right now. All these correspond to how it shapes how the company thinks about an investment location. I think also what's very important to note, as was mentioned by Klaus, right? Partnerships with the universities. I must say that TUM Asia is also established in Singapore, and they have a very strong collaboration with our universities as well, such as the Nanyang Technological University. And with this openness, it's about, I think in this world, it's about forming these ties of who do you want to then innovate together with. So the second thing that I encourage companies to think of is the value that you get from a specific location. Because if you think about it, the upfront cost is going to be high, right? If you talk about a one-to-one comparison about the talent, a one-to-one comparison about the infrastructure, energy costs, etc. But if you look at the total cost of ownership, then along the road of what you get from savings in terms of efficiency from, let's say, bureaucracy decisions, savings in terms of what you get because of the quality of manpower, the productivity that you get from this site, savings in terms of having a site that's not just value adding, so serving as an extended workbench for Germany, but also value creating, a team that can help you explore new and emerging markets and also create new product lines and have new mandates. And this is what we aspire to be when we talk to companies about what value they'll get in the long run. So I think these are two interesting points to consider. Of course, the business model will be depending on different companies at different points of time. And what is important is then to walk this journey with you to understand what will be suitable for your operations. So I would say it's quite interesting because what's very unexpected to most companies is that Singapore actually, if you look at our economic base, intuitively people think about Singapore as the Switzerland of Asia, or maybe a fantastic hub for lifestyle tourism, Taylor Swift concerts, Crazy Rich Asians, right? But if you look at the economy and you look at what comprises it, it's actually 20% manufacturing, about, and 20% logistics. So it's it's actually a manufacturing and a logistics hub, and these are the biggest pillars of our growth. So companies like Biotronic, IFM, and Ullman Park Systems, they've actually managed to set up manufacturing sites in Singapore and make it work. And it's also partly because of the productivity gains that they get, and how then some of them feed back to me that, hey, this is actually somehow doing better than their Eastern European sites even. So it's an interesting point to consider. Yeah.
I think we will do some more questions and then the roundtable will be finished. So just to encourage people to ask questions. So if you want to know about what EDB can do for your business, if you want to know about Wago's story, I mean, having you sitting here and showing us so many like real-time examples, please shout out and yeah, write us some questions, please, in the chat box if you're interested. One more question for you, Selina, before we take over to Pablo again. So we talked about the pricing now. You talked about what is the real cost in the future and how yeah, the price is not only a price issue, but also building on what Klaus said on collaborating with the universities and the skilled workers and the really high level. I don't know if this is part of EDB work as well, but what do you think? How is Singapore ensuring that this high quality is something that will continue in the future, the skilled high workers and so on?
Yeah. So I think one thing that we have to be very clear about is that Singapore won't be where it is without its partners. And partners, I mean companies who have taken the leap of faith, the commitment to invest in us back in also the 1960s. Partners such as LNC who have helped to bring together a closer network. And partners such as the universities and institutions who also actively try to build our ecosystem. And to assure that these keep growing or keep happening, I would say that one is a reliance on long-term planning. So for us, innovation and R&D, we actually have strategic roadmaps that we set every 5 years of how much R&D goes into which buckets. And this is called our Research and Innovation Enterprise Fund. So this is carved out into things like going into manufacturing, going into healthcare, going into white space, future technologies, digital, etc. So this in a way pushes us to also think about and scout out new disruptive enabling technologies. The second one is that we strive to keep whatever research that we make industry relevant. So for our research institutes, and the reason why they're so welcoming of partnerships is because they depend a lot on it as well. And for us, even when we support these programs, it's about asking them to think, okay, how do you, when you form a joint lab, for example, NTU has a joint lab with both Schaeffler and Continental. How do you make it so that the problem statements that you are making is aligned with the industry needs? So I think by doing so, we're both answering industry problem statements, which keeps us relevant, and also scouting out and looking out in future technologies. And of course, talent then is the same way. It's very important for us that our talent develops these industry relevant skill sets, and we do that through partnerships. It's also very important for us because our workforce, I think similar to Germany, is also aging. And we also know that we don't have a monopoly over the best talent, that we remain open to international talent who is looking to come into Singapore to make a difference as well. Yeah.
Pablo, taking over to you. After this, after the insights of EDB and after the insights of Wago as a real example, what would you say? Is Singapore or will Singapore still be the gateway to Asia if we look from now to the future?
Very good question, and I think to me very clear. I believe so, very clearly. And to answer these a little bit in perspective is to ask the question, why has been Singapore the gateway to Asia? And Selina mentioned these actually, is the values. And if I name a few of them, for example, what is the value of political stability? What is the value of rule of law? What is the value of an excellent and continuously an excellent infrastructure? What is the value to have the opportunity to find talents with the corresponding skills? So all these made Singapore, you know, a country, a platform for foreign companies to see and to find the confidence they need in order to do their business. And these platform or these set of values are there and are gonna be there moving forward. So what is happening now, and that's the reason why it's a very good question, is what is the change we are having in being or keeping this role as a gateway to Asia? Of course, things are shifting. And I'm seeing Singapore, and this has been mentioned a few times now as well, but I see Singapore still the gateway, but taking a new role, for example, a kind of coordination center where companies do set up an entity, but to understand the markets in the region, in the Southeast Asian region, but as well in the Asia Pacific region, is a platform, and this to me is quite important, to develop innovation. And this is what happened and what just Klaus mentioned, is develop innovation. You need to have, as a foreign company, the platform in Singapore in order to be enabled to develop innovations. And these platforms are represented, in black and white speaking, by the universities, by the research center Singapore has, by the continuous, you know, very critical adjustments of curricula. So what are the technologies we need to offer, and we need to prepare our people in Singapore in order to, as a country, to be attractive for foreign companies to set up their R&D center in Singapore. And this includes as well what I like to, and Selina mentioned that just now, partnerships, building partnerships. So to have these partners on-site, in the country. And, you know, it's very simple to say, you know, nobody achieved any success being alone. You are always, you know, working with teams, however you define team. But for a foreign company, it's extremely important, you know, to have partners, if we talk about R&D, to have partners supporting the entire idea. And all these shifts we are seeing in Singapore. And that's the reason why I still see, and that's the reason coordination center, because R&D is not something for Singapore only, is for the region, is to be closer to the regions for the companies to react faster to developments and fulfill market requirements. And if we then, you know, see, Jens mentioned these as well, is, you know, the keywords digital, the keywords intelligent, smart, strategic. We are in Singapore, all these, you're going to find these. So this is to me the answer for today's and what is happening right now. And now the key question, I think in my view, is, you know, what has to happen in order to keep this gateway, you know, of Asia for Asia in Singapore. And there I'm certain Singapore is going to put the effort, and because it's important for Singapore to be this gateway to Asia, is well, very simply speaking, to keep, continue investing in future technologies, in elements which are important in today's world, for example, sustainability. And to me, extremely important, the talent pool. So the talent. And talent means not only, as I mentioned, it's not only the number of people you have and qualified, you have to have the right skills. And that's where an entire, chain is around. The universities has to prepare to that, and so on and so forth. So these, and Singapore, I'm pretty sure it's gonna keep these.
I really like the word coordination center, because this describes really well also the title of our panel, which is Singapore as the opening to the regional growth and unlocking regional growth, because Singapore is not only about Singapore. And this was really, really, well considered into this word from you, Pablo, I have to say. Maybe a really short question to keep finalizing this. From your perspective, also because you have the consultancy perspective here in the room, what is your recommendation to a German Mittelstand company, so to a German SME, when they are planning their next move to Asia? Let's keep it like that.
Well, what would be my recommendation is that, the first is indeed, you need to be well informed in order to define what you want to do. And to be well informed means you need to have the proper data, the proper information about Asia. And Asia means, as I mentioned at the beginning, you need to have an answer how to react. Excuse me, let me go one step back. If you are interested, and the German companies are interested in growing their business, because Asia is offering the platform to grow businesses significantly more than we are experiencing in Europe. So Asia is one of the answers. We have the US, all right, but we have Asia, which is a huge market. So if you are already, over these questions, yes, I want to grow the business, you need to have an answer to the single markets, actually. You need to have an answer to China. What is your business model for China? You need to have an answer, what is your business model for India? You need to have an answer, what is your business model to Southeast Asia? And within these, what is the strategic role Singapore is going to have? And I would like to, the answer to the question is, you need to have the data, you need to have the information. And this is, to me, a challenge right now. Working around 30 years in the top management consulting business, what I'm seeing right now in Germany is, I like to call this an asymmetric status, asymmetric, with regards to the information amount and quality German companies have about the business they are doing in Germany and in Europe, which is very high, compared to the information, the amount and quality you have in Asia. So there is a gap. And because of this gap, many companies are quite hesitating to make fast the corresponding investment decisions. So it takes time to close this gap. And sometimes these gaps are not really close. And that means the investment decision is postponed. This is of course fatal for any company. But this is a reality I'm seeing, we are seeing. So the recommendation in that sense is you need to be well informed and you have to have an answer for the entire region. And this entire region is what I mentioned. And one thing I would like to add, because of the importance of Singapore in this context. We heard Singapore has around 2,300 German companies registered in the country. China has about 5,000 companies registered in China. And India has around the same number of companies as Singapore registered in the country, so 2,300. So you see a country, 20 times 40 kilometers, having that area, has the same amount of legal entities of German companies than India has. And India, I think, is a bit bigger, if I'm not wrong. So, and this is giving you already, what is the role Singapore has for Germany in the region? And these are the answers, you need to have. So.
I'm seeing the questions also in our chat box. I will take them in a second, but first, one last question for you, Klaus, from your perspective of Wago. So first of all, I would like to briefly ask, what would you say, really briefly, what were the biggest hurdles you faced, or what Wago faced, and what at the end made it worth it to step in Singapore and with the research center you were mentioning before?
Very simple question. Huh?
Okay.
Not really. No, when no, what is the, let's say undertaking all the legal steps and the setup. So this was no issue. There was a good support. This is no big deal.
This is not an easy thing in Asia, actually, to say. So
we're talking about Singapore.
Yeah, talking about Singapore.
Singapore. No, this was no issue. But again, I mentioned that we had already a subsidiary, and so it was is also one reason why it was easier. No, the major challenge is also to find the right talents, to find the right people. Also, there is a big pool, but in the end, we are working with people. These are human beings. They have all their background. You have to find the right people. And if you come as a newcomer in terms of R&D, you have then also first to explain what we want to do. And this is something new. And then to convince then good talents is then also somehow a challenge. So this was definitely one step or one hurdle. And the second point is the cooperation with the headquarters, with R&D in the headquarters. This is not to underestimate. So because we have some barriers, there's a language barrier. So also the German engineers in the meantime, they also talk English, but nevertheless, when you talk then with somebody from Singapore, with a Chinese background, a Malaysian background, an Indian background, then English can be a challenge. And then you understand only half, and then you are not brave enough to ask. And so you have the misunderstandings and so forth. So this is the one thing. And then a very simple documentation. We had many documents in German language only. So of course it's now easier to translate, but you have to do it. Yeah, you have to explain first what the processes are, what we have already in Germany. And so this is more so the daily things to make such an R&D center run. This cost us energy and time, but the setup itself was no point.
Okay, that sounds quite really good, actually, as a panorama. And maybe asking the same question as for Pablo. What would be your advice for a German Mittelstand company, a German SME, while projecting into Asia?
Yeah, well, as you know, most of the Mittelstand companies, they are small. They have less than 200 people, less than 300 people. So this is a challenge, to have somebody who can travel to Asia to set up such an R&D center, and you have not the people to support locally. So therefore, it is rather helpful if you are in an environment where you feel comfortable after a short time. I mean, where you have the support, where you don't have the challenges with authorities, where you have short ways, where you have no issues to immigrate and emigrate. This is all easygoing in Singapore. Public transport, no issue. The crime rate is no issue. You can walk over the streets by night without any problems and no fear. So this is already giving you somehow a good feeling for a first step. Yeah, to start with less people, with only a few people, and to learn. Actually, this is much faster and easier in Singapore. So that is why it is. I think also one reason, Pablo, that so many companies have a subsidiary are registered there. And then if you have undertaken the first steps, it's much easier than to go further, to go to the next country and to take the learnings and to take then the next challenge.
Selina, for you, last question. Same question, but why for the German Mittelstand, German SMEs, they should include Singapore in their Asia strategy?
So I think actually these points are very well covered by both Klaus, Pablo, and Pablo as well. I think for the German Mittelstand, given the amount of resources that you have, right? How much you have to and where you want to concentrate your energies on, picking the right base to start out, making sure that this expansion goes smoothly, and giving yourself the best chance to get in touch with the right people, network, and talents who can help you then with your successful expansion is important. And therefore, Singapore as a gateway would be a place you could consider, given the fact that it has all of these factors. Also, given the fact that, as you see here, there are willing partners and really agencies who are willing to step forward and support you in this journey. I think one thing also to share that I also personally quite proud of is that VDMA set up a Southeast Asian entity in Singapore earlier this year, which is it's actually quite a big step for them, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, thank you so much for all your insights. I would open the discussion for questions, and I will just drop the questions into the panel, and whoever feels ready to respond, just shout. And then, and if we can open the discussion here also for our people on site, that would be great. First question, I will read the name out loud because this is an open session and everyone can see this, so it's no secret. Johannes Tomé, referring to the recently signed free trade agreement between EU and Indonesia, and acknowledging what Dr. Lizana comments about the different levels of readiness. So the first thing you were commenting at the beginning. Why should German companies still use Singapore as a hub for their mid and long-term business strategy and not going directly into Indonesia? Who feels ready?
So thank you for the questions. Thank you for the question. Actually, this is a very good question because it applies to Indonesia, it applies to India, it applies, so we have indeed a certain competition within the countries in being a kind of hub. So Indonesia, why Indonesia in particular is I mean, let me see. Indonesia is developing extremely good. So it's a huge market. Is still an internal market. Is more dedicated to to offer, be attractive, to sell internally, and not export market as other countries in the region are. Singapore is very expensive compared to Indonesia, but we need to be very relative on that, because of what is the quality we are getting for a certain amount of money in Singapore, and what is the quality we're having in Indonesia. For now, I still see Singapore as being quite important for the region as a hub. Moving forward, and that was the reason why I was talking about what is happening in the future, and what is the role Singapore might have in the future being a gateway for Asia. And there we're going to have competition. I mean, companies have to think about cost. And cost, this is simply a given. So a P&L has two components, revenue and costs are in the surrounding countries different. As soon as the benefit to the cost changes in the surrounding countries, companies have to consider to set up different activities. But all these is a competition between the countries. So if one country reacts like this, how is the other country going to react to that move? So it's something quite dynamic what we're going to be experiencing on these. Difficult to answer the question, but it's a good question to consider. That's something for the countries, the strategists of the countries to look at this.
Maybe to add from our perspective from Asia Bridge, so FTAs are always a good sign. We can see this not only with Singapore, which is a great example, but also with Vietnam. I mean, Indonesia is a really, really big market if you're looking only at the ASEAN market. But I mean, if you see the main difference, I would say also the protectionism of the economy, which is quite a big deal in Indonesia. And this is completely the contrary in Singapore. So as a first step, also the regulatory basis and the strategy how to get in as a company, it will be easier for a big company further than for a Mittelstand company if they have a certain amount of money to invest into the ASEAN market. For sure, Indonesia is with their protectionism system is still a more complicated market to say. This would be my take on this.
Thank you, Pablo and Anna, for these really good points. I think also adding, maybe throwing in one more point to the mix is that is the intent of the company to only serve one market within Southeast Asia. So I would say for companies who, for example, have one customer and the customer has a very big base in Indonesia and it's the only customer that you want to serve, right? It probably would make sense for you to say, okay, I'm going to put my eggs in that basket. But if you're looking to service the entire region, then you have to have a little bit more of a strategic approach of what country or investment allocation allows you to do that. So let me give you an example of an industry that we see that's growing very heavily in the region. And in a way, some of the advancements are being led from Singapore. This is the data center industry. So for data centers, I'm not sure whether many of you guys are familiar with this, but for Singapore, we experience a very big flywheel effect with large tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, also Baidu, Aliyun, setting up their data center capabilities within Singapore. It got to a point where we said, okay, we need to pause this and we need to relook at how do you think about setting up not just any data center, but sustainable energy efficient data centers. And because of that move, now it's being a heavily researched topic within Singapore of tropical sustainable data centers. And of course, then this presents a new emerging market opportunity for companies who are servicing these this end market. So for example, cooling technology providers, interconnect providers, power electronic providers. And what they then find there is the innovations that are made within the country itself is a pilot to say, okay, once you get the track record, once you get that customer contract, how do you propagate then this new product line to the rest of the region and serve that? So it's something that companies need to think about. Thank you very much for the question, because it's an extremely valid one that I think a lot of companies have on their minds as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, jumping on the other question, I would say this goes directly to you, Klaus, because it's a question on Wago. The question is, what will be the percentage of turnover of Wago outside Europe, in particular in Asia, in 2030 versus today? I guess this goes on, your...
Well, our intention for 2030 is that we have about 25% of our external turnover outside Europe in Asia, 25 in Americas. So if you can calculate, and you know how much the European markets will give us. We are quite on a good way in Asia and Americas as well. Mm-hmm. But this is the target. Yeah.
That would be so 25% then, right? To sum it up.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we can extend that question and just saying, would you say that this is a trend for a lot of companies in your sector?
Yeah, the distribution is somehow plus minus very typical for medium-sized companies. Especially when you locate in Germany, the most important markets are within the European Union. And then you have somehow a balance between Americas and the APAC region. So it's I would say it is.
Okay.
Somehow.
Okay. Thank you for that question as well. Third question. And last question, actually, from the chat at least. How can companies use Singapore as a base for managing and coordinating their business while growing their markets, specifically in China and India? So this is the heaviest question for the...
Well, it's we are talking again about, so to say, the coordination center and the regional hub role Singapore might have. And well, there I have to say I have a clear opinion on that. So Singapore is a regional headquarter platform, and it might be it is a very good regional headquarter platform. But seeing the developments we are having in Asia and the dynamics and the differences between the markets, it's very challenging to continue steering, managing China from Singapore. China is a standalone market, is something specific. China is developed significantly over the last years, but more important is how is China going to develop the next years? What is the pace China is going to be giving? What is going to be the footprint of China in the world? We are in the third phase of the Made in China 2025 strategy, so to say, and that means go global. That's what China is going to be doing. So, and to manage the business from Singapore in China, I see it very, very challenging. A different story we do have in managing, so having the regional headquarter role of Singapore for the Southeast Asian region, including India. It's not a must, but it's a kind of can. So there I see a strong, still a very strong platform provided by Singapore because of the past we had, the experiences, the well-connected dots in the country towards the region. So many elements supporting these theses, so to say. So that's a little bit the difference I would be seeing now moving forward. And we have to consider, again, so two things. One is Singapore is interested in keeping the role of regional headquarter, and the region, we might define the region, that's one, but the adjacent countries are interested, to attract more to their own countries. So we are gonna still be in a competition over the years. I like to call this, and that's very common, and I suppose you know that as well, is the co-opetition situation we have. We cooperate, and Singapore is cooperating with the region very, very good. I mean, Malaysia, we have a very clear example, but it is as well in a competition, and everybody is aware of that. So the question is, how are all these countries, in particular Singapore, in this specific role, are they going to overcome these challenges in the next years to come? So a very clear distinction: China is one, and the rest of Asia is another. Singapore, from Singapore out, might include India, yes or no? It's a very specific question, but we know examples, for both situations. It depends on the business, it depends on the sector, etc., etc.
Can I add one point?
Of course.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think in business, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. We need to take sometime the hybrid approach. Of course, when it comes to Singapore, the brand, for certain things, establishing R&D, white-collar jobs, opportunities. But maybe we need, it depends what you want to achieve, it depends from company to company. I think we need to look at it as an hybrid approach to divide the strategy based on what we want to achieve. So there is no one-size-fits-all approach, in my opinion.
I think fully agree on that. I think for the answer to your question, we'll probably have to have a more specific discussion on that. I think it also depends on the stage of the company's internationalization, right? The current exposure that the company has to China, and what are your current assets there in place. So I know that for companies that are starting out, there are some case studies of companies who still use Singapore as a base and then send people over to China or have a small sales office there, and that's being coordinated. As the company's presence grows then, right, and they start anchoring increased value chain capabilities in the country itself, I think for all the reasons that Pablo mentioned, geopolitical tensions, how supply chains and competition tend to be, and regulatory hurdles that are there tend to be a bit more complex. Companies are adopting a China for China strategy. At least that's the trend that we are seeing for German companies. I think for India, it is an emerging market. So I think typically what we see is that you start out as have a base and choose your hub. And then you think about how do you want to expand from there. And once you gain traction in a certain market and it becomes large enough to, or complex enough to stand alone, then companies think about, okay, should we govern that separately? And in terms of the size that we see in China and the complexity, that is then the case as companies mature, but it may not be the starting point.
Well, thank you so much. There are no more questions from the chat box. I'm really happy about this discussion because the expert talks have always been about these more nerdy conversation about really specific topics. And I think this one was really interesting. We could have been talking about so much more. Thank you so much for the panelists and for all the insights. It was really, really interesting. And thank you for the whole setup, because this was the first time we are doing an expert talk, not only online. Usually every one of us would sit like in their office being super lonely, and here we are together, at least sharing the room. This was great. Next time we're doing it even bigger, even better. And so thank you for being part of this first experiment. Also, I mean, the whole setup, the whole audio, the whole video, everything, it is not easy to do. So thank you so much also to the Innovation Hub for giving us the space, the technology and everything to do this for the first time and to try. So I think it was a first good try. And I would say, Stefan, would you come over for a second and just introduce what the Innovation Hub is? Because Asienbrücke is a really big fan, and we are partnering this year. So we're really happy. Can you share us a bit what the Innovation Hub is doing?
Yeah, we are very happy that we get the space also here to do this kind of discussions and this panel, and that's also maybe we have the word innovation in our name and the hub. That means people come together and discuss the opportunities also. And that's what we are doing. Clear, we are accelerator for companies. They came from Asia and we satellite to Europe and starting in Germany, in the center of Germany near Frankfurt. That's what we're doing. We help companies to establish a company. We get different service packages also there, give them a space, give them sometimes only a table as a workspace or rooms, and starting to develop also. And that's also, it's good to have consultancies here. We make many events here with consultancies to have the ear on the market, special to Asia. And that's also maybe our cooperation with the Asian Bridge here, that we are here in Frankfurt based and give the space and also the community and extend the community. And we will do more and more this kind of hybrid events here, that also online people can dial in. And we have here also open discussions here. And that's more and more, if we extend, also we have, in the moment, we have 8 companies in. I hope next year we have 13 or 40 in. And then we have the people also here. And then it's very, very live. What is the experience here? And we do 70% of companies, they came from Asia, and maybe 30% we help Mittelstand companies to go to Asia and train them and consult them with partners. And like this discussion, it's a good example here with Wago, how to do it also. And that's maybe our force, and that's also, thank you to be here. And
because this is all about Asia, and Asia coming to Frankfurt, also for everyone that is watching online, if you're interested also in the services of Innovation Hub, you can reach out to us always on the info@asienbrücke.de. We have a specific Innovation Hub at asienbrücke.de email. So please reach out to us, because this is the main thing, to bring the Asian companies through Frankfurt to Germany, to Europe, or only to Frankfurt. It's up to you. And this is a really, really nice space. So whenever you're visiting Frankfurt, just came by. And so thank you for everyone. The session will finish now, so I will just tip the finalize button. And I really appreciate your time. Also for people getting in from Asia. It's really, really, really late, so highly appreciate it. And thank you, and until the next expert talk.